for CGBytes. Les Garner from 6S1 Media. The Director of Artist Development for CGBytes, and here to show you a little bit about the brush set for Zbrush users. That is the freebie that we're giving away for Christmas, or really it's for this week, but it just kind of lands on the Christmas weekend this year. So anyway, here I have loaded into Zbrush the original files from my Simply Human kit, which is a character texture set for the G3 male, which you can find in the store at CGBytes. And I'm just going to walk you through as I work with this with these brushes a little bit, making some additions to this texture, and show you kind of some of the uses for this. A few things about Zbrush and the brushes themselves. So this is sort of in lieu of the seminars that we've been doing each week. This is going to be a quicker video, but there will be a few more videos coming over the coming days and over the next week or so between now and the end of the year. Before we get started with the new program of artist development seminars and specifically CGBytes vendor seminars coming into 2017. So let's jump on into this. So if you download this this package of Zbrush brushes, okay, these are some brushes that I've made up just for you folks to use for playing around with some skin tones, and specifically for developing the surfacing of some rougher type skins, things that are good for maybe older men or sort of grizzled sort of characters. I like doing a lot of that kind of stuff. It's kind of one of my things with monsters and such. So those kind of skins are sort of an important thing to me. So let's get started. Here there are a number of different ways that you can load brushes into Zbrush. So let's cover some of that to get things going. So one way that you can load a brush in is through the brush menu, which you can get to here, or if you hit B on your keyboard, it'll pop up anywhere on your screen. Okay, so from inside this menu, either through here or hitting B on your keyboard, we can go to load brush. Okay, and then you just navigate to wherever you have your brushes stored. So for these, I have them stored here, Zbrush skin brush pack. And so let's just load any of these. Let's load large pores spray. Okay, so then you'll see it loads in our brush. And you'll notice that this brush has an alpha set up in it. And if you click on alpha, you can go in and see the settings that I've used for this. There's a number of little things I've done inside here to tweak out how this alpha works with the brush. And I would encourage you to look at how these things are set up, because a lot of what you see here, you can repeat these kind of settings and tweak them and adapt them and make your own brushes, and then share or even sell those for other Zbrush users. And I know a lot of folks collect huge numbers of brushes, and I personally have a library of about 300 of them that are completely original internal brushes to us here at 6S1 that I keep promising myself I'm going to release them in some form. We've released them commercially before and just haven't released those in a while. So that's something that we might want to look into, or if you look at the settings that we have here and kind of follow along some of the aspects of the brushes in this kit, you might want to do that for yourself. So here, looking at this first brush, we have our stroke set up as a spray, and then I have placement at 0.5, flow at 0.25. Already talked a little bit about our alpha. There, if I mouse over it, you can see what the actual alpha image looks like before the changes made to it inside the alpha tab. And then here we have a texture swatch that I put together that is really where the color comes from inside this brush. So if you're using one of these brushes with a texture inside the brush like this, then that will bypass the normal color information in ZBrush. Now, if you have Spotlight turned on, then it will ignore the texture inside the brush and use just what's in Spotlight. So Another little thing, though, is that the textures stored inside brushes can be used in Spotlight. So once you have a brush like this loaded, we could go into our texture here or here and then hit Spotlight and have that texture swatch available. Now, these aren't tiling textures. So, I mean, if we drag this, you're going to see that you'll see the tiling and all that. But if you wanted to use some Spotlight techniques with this texture, that would work as well. Let's kick out a Spotlight, though, and keep our texture in hand. The way that this is really intended for use is just in brushing on areas of a mesh. So here, let's take this, and we're just going to brush gently down the cheek. And I want to make sure that I don't have... Okay, cool. Yeah, everything is turned off there. So in here you can see it, the way that it applies color is very light. It's very sparse. This is mostly for surfacing, but it does apply a little bit of color. Now we can turn up or down the intensity of that if we like. And that's going to give you this nice up close bit of porousness in your skin. Okay. So, and that's one way that this brush can work really well up close. If we pull back, we can go to a larger size on the brush, and you'll see we get more of the color. It's very faint. I don't know if the screen cap will actually pick it up, but it is there. You'll see this faint warmth coming into our color as we brush. It really stands out more down here against the bluishness of the stubble shadows. Okay, but if you were to go in really, really close, you could see that as that color is applied, this map and the alpha map are synchronized. So the depths created in the pores correspond to the color. And this is a really handy little brush that I've made up for you guys for adding hints of porousness into your surfacing. Really helps bring that stuff to life so that when you generate normal maps, which if you've been following through with some of our past tutorials, you'll know how to do that now. And if you haven't, then I encourage you to go back and watch some of our videos, some of our past seminars. This will help you get a very nice, subtle sort of pore in the skin texture that carries through into your normal maps really, really well. And it's nice because you don't have to line things up to get this. You don't have to do any projection painting. You don't have to use Spotlight. You can basically focus on getting color into your texture and then just surfacing with this brush. And this is just one of the brushes. So let's go ahead and now that I've given you kind of a look at this particular brush, let's go ahead and look at another way to load the brushes, and then we'll look at the rest of our brushes, okay? So the way that I normally load brushes is I'll actually create a shortcut to them through the light box. And this is a handy little trick, okay? If we go into ZBrush, this is really a trick to use beyond just these brushes too. This is just a functionality tip for ZBrush users. If you're like me and you have a lot of different drives, different machines, things networked, all kinds of different places that you'll store data, and you want to be able to get to that stuff quickly from inside ZBrush, a very handy trick that I use for this is creating shortcuts that Lightbox will see. And you don't actually do this from inside ZBrush. So what I'm going to do, and this is actually a Windows trick here as well, is I'm just going to go to where I have my shortcut for ZBrush. Now for a lot of people this would be on their desktop, might be in your start bar. I have custom shortcuts for all my production tools down here, and I'll just click in this menu where I have my 3D programs all at, and then I'll right click on the shortcut for ZBrush and go to Properties. So I'm looking at the properties of the shortcut. and then I'll hit Open File Location. That way I know I'm browsing directly to where ZBrush is located. Really, really slick little trick. If you're using any programs that have assets embedded in their program directory that you might want to change at some point, but you're not quite sure where that stuff may be installed, this is a handy little trick for getting to those assets. So here we are looking inside our ZBrush folder. Now this is just right inside ZBrush 4R7, and here you'll see I have shortcuts for all these different folders. So let's say I want to quickly get to these brushes repeatedly. I would navigate to where I have these brushes, right-click, and create a shortcut for that, and then I'll just drag that over into my ZBrush 4R7 folder. So now if I go back to ZBrush and I close up the light box, the next time I go into the light box, I should have right in here, there we go, ZBrush Skin Pack. So now I have a shortcut in here directly to that folder of brushes. So you could do that for the one folder of brushes. I've done that for a number of different directories that are important to my day-to-day work, but this is just a quick method for putting things you know you're going to use frequently in a quick, easy to get to place. It's also handy because if you have assets across a network, like for instance here in our studio, Killian, my son who works with us, he and I share a lot of assets, so we keep a lot of those things stored externally, and then we both have shortcuts to them from inside our Lightbox, so we can both go grab them. And if we add new assets to those folders, whenever we refresh them, then that stuff shows up. So we're constantly sharing assets back and forth for our own production pipeline here. Really handy stuff. So now inside that folder, you'll find the texture swatches are there in case you want to use those for anything. But here we have our brushes. So we already have large pore spray loaded. Let's load in large pore stamp and take a quick look at how this one works. Now this is a variation on large pore spray, but this is using a drag rectangle function. And you'll see it's a very subtle brush, but it allows you to just click and drag and place these details wherever you click, and then you can see them grow as you pull. Now, I just turned up the RGB intensity a little bit so that I could have a little more color going in as I pull my brush. But again, just as with the previous brush, you can see that the alpha and the color, their details all match up. So you can do quite a bit with these brushes like this, just dropping in large bits of skin detail and noise. Very handy. So let's go and take a look at the next brush. It would be, let's see, mild creases spray. And let's go down somewhere else on our texture model here. So here you can see that this one works similarly to our first spray brush, but with it you have some different textural data and you have some lines and creasing that come up. You can see it in the texture map here. And again, this is all synchronized between the texture and the alpha. So you might want to turn up or down the RGB or Z-add values depending on the effect that you want or the amount of the effect. And another little trick that you might want to keep in mind is sometimes you might want the creases to run a different direction. You might want them to be flipped, say 90 degrees. If so, you would go into the Alpha menu and hit Rotate. And you could go into the Texture menu and hit Rotate. So as long as those are rotated the same, they will stay synchronized. Okay. So now let's go back to our light box and we'll grab the next one, and this is Mild Creases Stamp. And I'll show you how this one's working just as soon as it finishes doing a quick save. which could take it a minute. This is a pretty heavy, heavy file. Okay, so most of these use a similar setup, and the thing that really changes is the texture and alpha. Most of them do have different alpha setups from other brushes, where I've gone in and tweaked the alpha settings specific to the alpha that I would generate that corresponds with that texture. So here you can see we're just clicking and pulling. I like this one quite a bit. Say I wanted to add striation around the say the armpit. You can drag and pull and then control where some of those lines go. It's also really handy for, let's say you wanted to age someone a little bit. You wanted to add some lineage around the neck. Okay, see how we start to get that that little bit of aging there, and of course you could turn the Z-add up on it and get the effect pronounced much more. Okay, so our next brush then is going to be the mottled skin spray. I love that word mottled because it sounds like mottled most of the time you say it. It's just kind of funny to me. But the texture in this is of a mottled skin texture that has like some liver spots, moles, little imperfections that I like seeing show up in a model. And here we'll just spray some of this in. By default, I have the RGB set pretty low on this brush, but if we turn that up, you should start to see a little bit more of that coming in. And as is almost always the case with any brushes, you're probably going to need to play with them a little bit as you use them to get what you're after. Mostly with the RGB and Z-add settings. So there really isn't a be-all and end-all kind of brush that you can do for anything with those. You always are going to have to tweak those particular settings a bit. But here you can see this is a nice overall coverage brush. Another one that just gives you a different variation, different kind of porousness in the skin, different kind of detail. Then our next one is the variation on that. It's mottled skin stamp. So let's just pull this one. You'll see there's how the texture comes out on that. Let's turn the RGB up on that and the Z intensity down a little tiny bit. Okay. And there you can see we really start to pull some of those more pronounced sort of details. And I find that these work really well for, let's say, a nose. Like if you wanted to age the nose of a character a bit, playing with these settings is a really good place to do that, especially if we turn the texture all the way up. And a little variation to this too, because right now I tend to like for my brushes to work with a lot of subtlety and I build up gradually. But if you want something a little more pronounced, you could come into the alpha settings and go to the focal shift and just move that slightly to the left, very tiny little bit. And now you'll see we get a whole lot more of that color data. So let's just smooth back some of this from previous brushes, and we'll drag this on, and you can see, there we go. There's that color data showing up, adding that roughness into the skin. It's very, very handy. Okay. So those were the mottled brushes. Now let's grab the ruddy spray. And with this one, you'll see it's ruddier. It's got a lot more heat in the texture. It's a much warmer color. And this one, I really like this one for coming in to places like in around the eyes, warming up the nose. So you've got an older fellow who has maybe he's done a little drinking in his day, and you want to warm up that nose, bring some blood vessels and things to the surface a bit more. If we come brushing in with this, you'll see how it adds that modeling and a ruddiness that's a little different. Okay, so let's blow some of that in here, and you really get the most out of the texture in there when you take your brush up to a really large size and then zoom in. And the model I'm working with right now has hair textured in already. Most of the time I would be working with these kind of brushes and skin before doing any kind of textured hair. We could actually take this character and turn it bald very easily using these brushes. If we were to take, let's say, the large pore spray and turn the RGB all the way up, we could actually play with our settings there. We could turn the flow up on that and maybe turn our Z sub down and just go back and forth smoothing out that hair and really paint out the hair into a pretty decent scalp with just the mapping from some of these brushes. So this is just for the sake of demonstration. So he can get some really ugly baldness going on right now, and that's fine with me. Waiting on this for a second as it reduces the subdivision level once, so that I want to smooth the rest of this out, so I've got a larger, broader surface to show these brushes over. And just kind of continue with that example of painting out the hair in favor of all this color. So there we go. And sometimes too, when you want to make broad strokes to the texture on a figure, you can blow in that poly paint at lower subdivision levels, and you'll find that since it's working on larger micropolygons, it will tend to paint faster. It won't have as much detail, but you can get a lot of color coverage really quickly that way, and then go back to your highest subdivision level to build up the rest of your details. So here, let's just smooth this out a little bit more at this lower subdivision. That's the other thing too. You can go up and down these subdivisions and smooth the model out, and you'll start to really kick out some of that the shape that might be present from some of your sculpting. So let's go back to the highest sub D. Give that just a moment to catch up. Now that we're there, do want to do a little bit more smoothing. Let's turn my Z add all the way up. Let's just finish out smoothing all of that hair away. And this also gives us now another opportunity to look at another use for these brushes. Any of these brushes can be used with the texture that's in them, or you could simply go to Texture Off, click here and hit Texture Off, and then you'll be using whatever color is in your color swatches. So let's say, for instance, we wanted to even this color up, but we wanted to do it using some of this texture from the alpha. We could just turn the texture off and then click on our color swatch and pick a neighboring color from somewhere where a map previously was. And now when we paint in with this brush, these nice big broad strokes, you'll see we're able to even this up and make it match pretty darn well. Okay. So there, in just a few strokes and a couple of mouse clicks, we've taken away the hair and we're ready to build up something else. Now, since this model already had hair kind of sculpted and painted in, the shape is a little odd right now, but that's okay. This is just for the sake of demonstration. So Let's just return that texture back in. And let's look at our last brush, the Ruddy Stamp. And as before, this is a variation on the Ruddy Spray. So you just click and drag this, and feel free to experiment with these. You know, take the stroke and change it to, say, a drag dot. Sometimes, if I know I want roughly the same size stamping, then I'll just take a drag dot and just tap with my brush, so that I'm just dropping large dots of color and surface data into place. And I don't know if the mic is picking up the sound of my pen, but you can actually hear where I'm just tapping my pen to drop those details in. So that's cranked up to a real extreme there, but it's just for the sake of showing how that works. So that's just a quick look at these freebie ZBrush brushes that are a nice little utility for helping you out with certain types of skin texturing. Feel free, though, to take these apart, look at them, look at their settings, look at the setup, especially in the alpha, and play around with them. Maybe post some screenshots of things that you do with them, maybe changes you make that work well for you. We'll share those, and who knows, maybe we look at some of that kind of stuff when we update the package, or we do another freebie based on that. But I want to make sure that we do this from time to time, that I give you some of these ZBrush assets, since we do so much training and teaching in ZBrush. So that's it for now. It's just a quick look at this ZBrush skin pack that we're giving away this week, and a few tips and tricks on how to use it, some little inside tricks inside ZBrush. Hope you enjoyed the video, hope you enjoyed the brushes, and since it is coming up on the holidays, Christmas weekend, for those of us here who celebrate that, I hope you guys all have a great holiday, whatever you're observing, and just a really good time as we close out the year. Best wishes, season greetings, all that stuff. And until next time, keep making cool stuff, have fun making art. I'm Les, and this is CGBytes. Thanks.